Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
The record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Madam Speaker, I think you want to mention something about our island games and talk about our young folks.
Yes. I think that sometimes we neglect, and maybe it's been said other places, but I still think we have an opportunity to say it here. We should make a special point of congratulating our young people who are success stories. We talk about the ones who make headlines and break somebody's house and all the rest of their banner headlines in the newspaper. But in the Island Games this week, we had Jamal Walton, who earned a gold medal for the 200 meters in 21.55 seconds. He was way ahead of the two competitors that were the two nearest competitors in the race. He was way ahead of them. The group has already racked up 9 medals, and they're 12th on the medal table right now and moving ahead. So I think it is important that we give these young people the exposure that they really deserve, because they've worked very hard to reach this point, and they are great ambassadors for the Cayman Islands. And I want to say congratulations to all of them.
Certainly.
I want to concur with Dr. Lawrence too, and the problem that we have is that, like most Caymanians who exceed or professional, they don't recognize us as professional people. They don't have much respect for professional people, and I think that carries over to the athletes too. They don't really recognize them as being something special because it doesn't include a lot of money. Unless you have a lot of money that you're known for, the money that you have in your pockets and your bank account and the gated communes that you live, there's not much respect for you. And so that's the reason why a lot of these young people now go abroad, and they go to America or some other place where they recognize and where their athletic abilities can carry them forward and give them a good education. I know that a lot of them have done that. So we have to sort of to revamp and revise our society or our priorities to what they are, because if we don't, not only are we going to be swamped with mosquitoes, but we are going to be swamped by another army that we will not accept. And that brings me to the headlines in the paper yesterday, and things I've been hearing about our new governor
governor designate. Yes,
our new governor designate. That he's not the traditional type of governor that we have been used to. He's not the typical English white Anglo-Saxon Protestant governor.
WASP. Yes.
White Anglo-Saxon Protestant governor, and I think that has been a not a controversy, but have been have tongues wagging in certain sections of the society that this new person who is I don't know if I can say he's not black, but I can say he's probably what they Cayman would call colored, because he's not white. Yeah. And this is the first time that we've had a governor like that, who brings a family that are not Protestants, and we'll see how that is going to play out in our society and what people have to say about it.
Well, I think we had better start getting accustomed to it, because the UK is really embarking on this whole campaign and process of diversification, and you're seeing more and more non-white persons either in positions in government or otherwise. So this is one step that is being taken so far. Do we expect to see others when possibly will we see a governor who is a gay governor? We have an Irish prime minister who is gay. If the UK continues down the path of diversity and saying, this is our appointment, we are we're empowered to make that appointment. When next we may see a governor who's gay and who comes with a partner to the Cayman Islands and is sent here, what are we going to do then? What happens if we get an atheist governor who and that governor may decide to remain silent about their religious position, or may wear it on their shirt sleeves and say, I am an atheist? Are we going to be prepared to accept that? Is that where the line in the sand is going to be drawn when people, Caymanians, say, this is it? It goes contrary to our constitution, to our beliefs, to our upbringing, and this is where we part ways. Will it take that for it to happen, Madam Speaker?
You know what? This little drip, drip, drip thing that is practiced, we get accustomed to the drip, and when one more drip is added, we don't even notice that it's been added. And I think that has happened in our society over and over. And changing the subject a little bit, I was looking at some of my records, and we have reached a point some years ago where we had every major bank in this island was headed by a Caymanian. And today you're lucky if you get by the counter at the front desk, you don't get much beyond that. We had law firms that were founded by Caymanians. They've all disappeared, been enveloped by bigger firms that have come in, absorbed by them. We had the police force. Until Tempura, all of our top officers were Caymanians and very able officers. We didn't have crime like we have it today. Mm-hmm. Tempura took care of that. We have, for generations, had our fire service led by a Caymanian. That has disappeared. Yep. Our prison service was led by Caymanians. That has disappeared. I mean, we're and it's just happening little by little by little. Our schools are headed by Caymanians. That's disappeared too.
Yep. And that is what the Caymanian Protection Law was designed to do, to ensure that those things that we're a little bit late for the news, so we have to go now. But that is a perfect segue when we come back to start to talk about our Caymanian Protection Law, the whole issue of Caymanian status as well. Please stay tuned. We're going to the news now. When we return, the conversation will continue with Dr. Steve McFeel and Madam Speaker. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, Honorable Mary Lawrence, former Speaker of our Legislative Assembly, Dr. Steve McFeel. I'd like to point out also that the Speaker, former Speaker, also has an honorary doctorate as well. I prefer to call her Madam Speaker.
Thank you.
We always say, in order for us to know where we're going, we need to know where we're coming from. We started on Monday talking about the Caymanian Protection Law 1971, and I want to read a little bit more from the member of our Legislative Assembly, member of Executive Council, who introduced the bill in our Legislative Assembly, and that would be Mr. Benson O. Ebanks. In a part of his speech, his presentation, Mr. Benson said, Mr. President, it is an undisputed fact that this territory has enjoyed and continues to enjoy unprecedented development. This development is attributed to a stable government, friendly, industrious, and honest people. But, Mr. President, we are also all aware of the tremendous pressures which are being exerted on the society by the rapid development of these islands. From time to time, members of this honorable House have expressed the view that our existing immigration laws are inadequate. There's also been expression to the effect that the rights and interests of Caymanians as regards gainful occupation and participation in the development of the islands are not adequately protected. I'm going to read that part again. Right? There's also been to the effect, an expression to the effect that the rights and interests of Caymanians as regards gainful occupation and participation in the development of these islands are not adequately protected. He could be talking about 2017 as well, rather than in 1971. And those of us who have had discussions with our constituents know that there exists amongst them fears in this respect. Whenever there is discussions regarding the continued future expansion and development of these islands, it is always emphasized and concern is expressed that the goodwill, peace, and tranquility which exists in abundance in these islands are preserved, that the goodwill and friendliness which exists between Caymanians and those who come from abroad to invest and work and live amongst us is preserved. It is also generally accepted, Mr. President, that a lack of understanding of these factors have contributed unfavorably in other territories to produce recession, with booming economy such as ours is today was the order of the day. Something is missing on that. I'm going to try to see if I can retrieve that part of it. Just bear with me.
You should do what I do, print it.
Yep. To produce a recession where a booming economy such as ours is today was the order of the day. It is the responsibility of those of us who are charged with the government of this territory to bear these factors always in mind. It is our responsibility to anticipate and enact legislation which will ensure the continuation of our stable way of life, continued development, and at the same time ensure for Caymanians an improved quality of life. Mr. President, I stress the words quality of life, because often more jobs to choose from, more money in people's pockets are not enough. If the Caymanian way of life is to be improved, there must also be freedom from fear, freedom from anxiety, war, and hope and faith in the future. A guarantee that the next generation of Caymanians will participate fully and on equal terms with all. We are also aware, Mr. President, that we in the Cayman Islands are in need of capital from outside. We also are aware that for many years to come, we will continue to be in need of persons of non-Caymanian birth or status who possess special skills, knowledge, and talent, and may even need to have ordinary labor to come to these islands to work and live amongst us. This capital which we need, the people whom we need, must also be made to feel secure and welcome here once they are allowed to come in. There will also be those who, once having seen what we have to offer, will want to make the Cayman Islands their permanent home. We also owe it to those persons to make them feel welcome and to ensure that once they are afforded this privilege, once they are afforded this privilege, okay, I'm gonna break there because we're having difficulty finding that. But what Mr. Benson is saying here, folks, is that he's laying out all of the reasons why we need a protection law, laying out reasons for allowing people to reside permanently if they come here and and if they want to stay. But all of that, the caveat there is that Caymanians must be protected. Caymanians must come first. He laid the foundation for that. And that Caymanian Protection Law of 1971 worked well, at the time for that. We have moved far beyond that now. We have had several amendments to the Caymanian Protection Law. We had several amendments up to the point where someone in their wisdom felt that we need to change the name. We no longer need to call it the Caymanian Protection Law. Was the
purpose?
Yeah. Was that because they felt that Caymanians no longer needed protection, that the protection was no longer necessary? If that was the case, they were totally, absolutely wrong in that regard. So we had amendments in 1977, which had to do more with the acquisition of Caymanian status, especially for people born inside the Cayman Islands or born outside of the Cayman Islands. Then, of course, we had the 1984 legislation. We had amendments again in 1992. We had in 2004 we had a new immigration law again. So we saw all of those changes taking place. But the original Caymanian Protection Law, and like we pointed out before, taken from the Bermuda immigration law or Bermuda Protection Law, which was really crafted and designed based on Swiss immigration legislation. Dr. Smith?
Well, I think the very last word you used is the word that we have all forgotten, and that it is a privilege. It is not a right. I think we have gotten to the point where everybody believes it is a right for them to remain here, and it is not a right. It is a privilege.
Sure, and
Yes.
It is when we started out with the Caymanian Protection Law, we had a quota, so many people from each country to come in. We now have 130 nationalities living in our islands, and we're swamped. It's not that we know we need people to come in, but there has to be a format under which they come, they work, and they leave. It cannot be a format where they come and then they can stay ad infinitum, because this is what is happening right now. We have to understand that when we allow someone the privilege of living in this island, we're taking on their family, we're taking on their extended family, we're taking on the expenses of having to educate their children, of providing health services, of providing the infrastructure to cope with the additional people. All of these things are being taken on. And then we're not administering it properly, because I read recently where 400, and this is in the PR thing that we're now under the gun for. Mm-hmm. We have $4 million in outstanding fees from 473 PR persons. Every year, the person on permanent residence is supposed to pay a fee. But there are people who have not paid that fee for years. And who's administering it? Who's monitoring it? Who's making sure that these things come in? Because the money that they're paying is supposed to pay for the services that we are going to render to them while they're here staying on that, while they're enjoying that status. It is the person who's on a work permit has to pay a fee. The person who's on and has to pay it, because if he doesn't pay it, he's in trouble, and his employer is in trouble, because the employer is actually supposed to be paying it. But when you get the PR person who's responsible for paying it himself, And nobody monitors that to the extent that we have $4 million in outstanding fees. Do you know where that could go in education this year to provide us with teachers
And
that we need so
scholarships.
badly and classrooms that we need so badly? We haven't built any classrooms in the last 5 years in this island. It's time for us to consider we're adding people to our community. We're now 6 times the number of people we had when the Caymanian Protection Law was written. And the more people we add, the more services we need and the more facilities we need. And we have to understand that there has to come a point where we are monitoring this much more closer than we're doing right now. We just can't let it just keep going on and on and on and pretending that these problems don't exist.
Okay. We have one caller. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, and thank you for taking my call, Mr. O.C. A special good morning to Dr. Steve Maxfield and Dr. Mary Lawrence. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. You've been radio silent for quite a while, Quincy.
I'm doing much more listening these days
Okay.
and less talking, which
Okay.
is very important, I think. I want to thank Honorable Mary Lawrence and Honorable Maxfield for continuing to be guests on this show and also on the other talk show by another radio station, in that I think they have so much to offer. Not only have they lived through a lot of our history, they've taken the time to do their research. And like a student, I've been glued to my radio, listening, taking notes, so that I too can, when I do speak, I can make an informed contribution to conversation. So I would just like to encourage Dr. Lawrence and Dr. Maxfield to continue to make your valuable contribution to our history. I know Ms. Mary Lawrence, former journalist, editor, former Speaker of the House, and I think she still has so much more to offer her country. And I'm
Thank
grateful for you're welcome, and it comes from a heart of love and sincerity. Mr. Maxfield, again, not only is he an avid storyteller, because he's lived through the changing times of Cayman, he has much more to contribute as well. So
Thank you, too.
you're welcome. Persons my age and younger, let us continue to listen, learn, so that when it's our time, if that time ever comes again, to take the baton, we'll be prepared to do just that. Now, I want to talk about 4 things before I hang up. I am cognizant that we are on radio and time is of the essence, but
We know you can go through them very quickly, Quincy, so no problem.
But we have a problem. If we have a population in the Cayman Islands of 60,000 and only 21,000 and change are allowed to vote, that's a problem. Most of the people living here can't vote or they don't want to register. That's one point, right? And we have a lot of people who are demanding permanent residence. They're demanding Caymanian status. Now, do we want to see what we saw happen in 2003 repeat itself? But we cannot have people living here for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and they're unsure about their future. So I'm surprised we don't see more civil unrest. We don't see more demands on the streets because people come here. We welcome them with open arms, and they don't want to go home. They make Cayman their home, and I just can't help but mention people such as His Worship, the late Kipling Douglas, and also Mr. Simmons, one being obviously a judge, the other a businessman. They're from other Caribbean islands, but they came here, made Cayman their home, they contributed, and they would argue that they're Caymanian, rather in a legal sense by being status, but this became their home, right? So condolences to those respective families. But I think that the politician, Mr. Chris Saunders, has it right. There needs to be more of an attitude of entitlement amongst Caymanians, because how do we build national pride? How do we build our nation of wanting to excel academically, athletically, culturally, if Caymanians don't feel they're a part of the process? And as it is right now, I think we're reenacting that scene from Titanic after the ship had struck the iceberg and so many of the lifeboats went to waste because you had people like boats could hold up to 60 persons, and you only had like 20 on a lifeboat. And as the lady gets up and says, "Come on, we got to go back. It's our men and women out there. We got to go back." And the British man says, "Shut your mouth, or there'll be more space because you'll be getting off of this boat." I compare that to our politicians. We elect them, but then are they truly fighting for us, the Caymanian people?
Okay.
I could go on, but I'll call back directly or tomorrow about the mosquito situation.
Thank
because
you.
I wrote a poem called Mosquito Ton Motor Car. And if you are to read that piece, I'm using mosquito and motor car as a metaphor to represent Caymanians and those who've joined us, calling themselves Caymanians. I could go on forever, but I'm going to hush now and listen to what I got to say.
Thank you very much, Quincy, for that. We're going to take a commercial break. When we come back, we will have an opportunity to make some comments on what Quincy had to say. Please stay tuned. For the record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record. We have one more caller, so we're going to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. O.C.
Good morning,
Good
ma'am.
morning, ma'am.
Good morning, Miss Mary, and good morning, Dr. Steve.
Good morning,
Good
ma'am.
morning, Miss Georgia.
Mr. O.C., please tell me what and what year did Mr. Benson write that speech?
1971, ma'am. That was his presentation to the Legislative Assembly when he was presenting the bill called the Caymanian Protection Bill.
And that speech is really, it could have been written yesterday.
Yes, ma'am.
Because, and excuse me, Miss Mary and Dr. Stephen, Mr. O.C., I didn't say to you, I trust that all three of you and your family members are well. You know
Thank you.
that's the
Thank you
old
very
Cayman.
much, ma'am. And we
Thank
trust
you,
the
ma'am.
same
We know
to
you
you.
feel
Thank
like
you.
that.
That's the old Cayman way. But earlier on, I think it was you, Mr. O.C., or was it Miss Mary, kept saying all the positions that were once
Held by Caymanians.
shared by Caymanians year after year. They lost their positions and have been filled by foreign people. Nothing against foreign people. But do you know something? I hope the three of you will agree with me. If you don't, I'll be very disappointed. Most of these things that have happened to us, we allowed them to happen to us.
Mm-hmm.
That's
We just
correct.
sat back and everything that's been pushed on us, we have accepted it. Nobody
The
put
little
a
drip,
gun
drip
to our
thing.
head. But because we're such a kind and loving set of people, and at times a bit naive, these things have happened to us. And I hate to be a Job's comforter, but I have many friends who are much more intelligent than I am. Say to me, Georgia, the worst is yet to come. What are we doing to our people? What have we already done to our people and our young people? Forget about them. What future do they have in front of them? What is there for them to hope for? And hope is so important. Once you lose hope, you become depressed, and when you become depressed, all kind of things happen to you. May God help. Well, he's helping us all the time, but we have to get up and help ourselves.
The Lord help those who help
Amen.
themselves.
And not the government that's in now, and even those a few behind. This has been going on for years, and surely intelligent people have seen it, and they have done nothing about it.
Yep.
I hope that something will be done soon. A little island the size of the palm of your hand and 130 different nationalities, that's ridiculous. May God, in His mercy, keep taking care of us. But we, down on this little island, have to take care of ourselves, of our people, for a change.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ortiz.
Thank you
God
very much.
bless.
Thank you very much, Miss Georgette. We just have about a minute or two before we go to another commercial break, so I'll just continue to read Mr. Benson's introduction of the bill. He says, but Mr. President, as proud and independent and as friendly as we are, and with all the goodwill in the world, we are still few in numbers, and it is physically and humanly impossible for us to absorb all the capital and all the people who would desire to settle here all at once. This is not my only contention, Mr. President. This is substantiated by studies which have been conducted by international agencies for the development of undeveloped countries, and even though the science of economics may be argued to be an inexact one, it is generally accepted by leading economists. In view of what I have said, Mr. President, our responsibility as the people's representative seems very clear to me. We have to legislate laws which will ensure the continued development of our islands, whilst at the same time ensuring the protection of Caymanian rights and privileges, and the rights and privileges of those non-Caymanians who are permitted to join us in building up this small territory. We have acknowledged these responsibilities and have made it known publicly for some time now that we intend to introduce the 3 bills which are before us today. That is the Caymanian Protection Law, the Local Companies Control Law, and the Trade and Business Licensing Law. Now, one very important point that he raised there, he says that we have to legislate laws which will ensure continued development of our islands, whilst at the same time ensuring the protection of Caymanian rights and privileges, and privilege of those non-Caymanians who are permitted to join us. So he's wanting to strike that balance to ensure that we protect, because that's going to be important in crafting any immigration law. You don't want to create fear amongst people to say, you're favoring Caymanians, but you're victimizing us at the same time, and have a flight of capital, or have a flight of people from the islands as well. We know that many times people use that to threaten us when we try to do things. Like when one time there was a thought about introducing taxation on those persons who are here on work permits, and they were up in arms, about that. We hear now about the pension scheme, and so 2,500 people are going to leave because they want to take their pensions money. We're seeing those persons, and they're telling us where their interest lies, whether or not it lies with the Cayman Islands, and or whether or not they're interested in their own well-being, as well. Comments on those things.
I've heard the rumor about the pension fund. I don't know of anywhere in the world you work and you pay into the pension fund and they let you carry it with you when you're going. It's you pay into the fund, and if you can come back to that country at some point when you retire and collect it, that's great. Or even if you were allowed to transfer it to another country, but the pension, when you're talking about 2,500 people, this is a serious threat as far as I'm concerned to the stability of this country. When 2,500 people who have been given the privilege of living and working here decide that they are going to pull out of this country and take their pension money with them. In other words, they're going to have a run on the pension funds, just like you have a run on the bank. They're going to grab their money and run. Are we going to welcome them back when they want to come back next week? After they take their monies abroad? We have to start looking at what is happening here. And if they want to threaten us, call their bluff. It's time to call their bluff.
Okay. Paul, we have 2 callers. Do we want to take a break first or take the calls? We're going to take a commercial break. Those 2 callers that are on hold, hang in there. As soon as we come back from this quick commercial break, we will be going straight to you. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record. Going straight to the phone lines as promised. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, OC.
Good morning, sir.
And good morning to the lady or whoever that is with you.
Madam Speaker, Ms. Mayor Lawrence, Honorable
good morning,
Mayor
Madam
Lawrence.
Speaker, Ms. Mayor Lawrence.
Good morning, sir.
Stanley Hill here. OC, Ms. Mary Lawrence. When I was a kid, about 6 years old, I was very inquisitive. And I'm hearing you speak about the Protection Board. Okay? Now, when I was a kid, let me go back 50-something years ago. You know those little wind-up cars we used to get for Christmas?
Mm-hmm.
I had to know what made that work, how it worked, and why it worked. So I used to dig in and get to the bottom of those little cars to find out what made them function. Now, the Caymanian people need to know who removed the Protection Board and why the Protection Board was removed from the Caymanian people. That is where we need to look at, sir. And
Well, what they did, caller, was they removed. They didn't remove the board or the law. They just changed the nomenclature. They changed the name.
We had a little
to,
drip process.
Yes,
Where they take this little piece this week and this little piece next week until finally it had all disappeared and we didn't know it had gone.
Yes.
But regardless of what they've done, it doesn't work for us anymore because
Right.
No.
it does not work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't work. Now, we need to know why and whom. Now, I know what, I read my Bible, and I know from King David and Samson, I know what destroyed men, those two men in the Bible. It was greed and promiscuity. I think I know it's not saying the word, but women. There are two things that motivate man, money and women. Now, I don't know which one that motivated these guys or whoever it was that did this to the Caymanian people. But it's a crying shame and it's a disgrace. Why they removed that or whatever you all say they done, whether they chipped away this or they amended that. And I must say kudos to Captain Ebanks, Mr. Ebanks from West Bay, where you say that got up and made the protection law. Now we need men like him still to run our country.
Yep. Thank you very much, caller, for that. Let's take the other caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record. Caller, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Osi,
Good morning.
and to your panel.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am.
I listen religiously, but this is the first time I'm actually calling in. I can't let this subject go past and not call in because it's something that I'm passionate about.
Okay.
I'm a young Caymanian. I'll call myself a half-breed because my father is Caymanian and my mother is an expat. And one thing that I think needs to be redefined is the term the persons with Caymanian status. They believe, in my opinion, that once you get Caymanian status, you're automatically a Caymanian, which, in my opinion, is not the case. You become a citizen of the Cayman Islands. You don't hear a person with American citizenship saying that they're American when they have a green card. So I think it should be the same here. And another thing, Miss Mary had said previously that back in the days we had a quota of how many people could come in from each country. I think that's what she said.
Yes, I did.
Could it be something that we could implement again? Like, for instance, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but Canada has something similar in place that each province has. They look for a set amount of skilled workers for each industry. Maybe it could be something that we could implement here. Just my 2 cents. I'll listen to your comments, your response.
Thank you very much, caller. Before we answer, while it's still fresh in your memory, let's answer that caller's question.
Well, one of the first things, caller, is that you cannot compare us with the United States because where citizenship is concerned, because we have no citizenship. We are British overseas territorial citizens. We are colonial people. And so that's the reason why we use the nomenclature status to denote citizenship. so we're all have Cayman status. I have it because I was born here in the time when the law says, when the 1971 protection law came into effect, it says all the people who were born here at the time and who were residents here and who were ordinary residents here and who have a domicile here had Cayman status. So that's how I got it.
And before that, the terminology was you were deemed to belong to the territory.
Deemed to belong to the territory. And I was a British subject.
Yes.
I was a British subject before that.
And all of these terminologies were developed by the British because
yes.
we were part we were owned by them,
yes.
we should say. Huh?
So once a person has Cayman status, he's under our law. He seemed to be a Caymanian. Now, Miss Mary Lawrence, I was off when we were off the air at the last break. I was asking her to continue to develop the system of entitlement and for to reside in the Cayman Islands. And so we had a quota, of course. We gave 12 people a year, and you had to work very hard to get that. You had to prove that you could live in Cayman Islands without relying on the government.
You could not be on a work permit.
You could not be on a work permit. You have to be independent, and you have to be an independent person. And I think as the population started to increase, that went up to 25 a year. And I'll never forget the time that Austin.
No, I think it actually stayed at 12 per year, and then there was a period of something like about 10 years when the government basically didn't provide a quota at all, and that was being challenged at one point.
That was being challenged.
Yes, yeah.
But in no country in the world, can you go on a work permit, a permission to work, because that's what permission to work, and then tell people that you're entitled to their citizenship. Yeah. That there's no law in the world, there's no international law that did protect you for that. Mm-hmm. And every country has the right, and we have it in our immigration, in our constitution, we have the right to regulate who come, who go, and who works in the Cayman Islands and continue business.
Exactly.
And so what we need now is men like Mr. Benson again, those stalwart men. We need some people like those, like Mr. Craddock, Mr. Benson, those people now to take the reign now to set the new policies that is going to protect the Caymanian people. Because if we don't do that, we are going to be overrun. Because can you imagine that everyone who comes to Cayman Islands then on a work permit was to be entitled to stay? What would happen?
Yep. Okay, we have one more caller. We're going to take the callers' comments or questions before we go to our headline news, and then we can address it afterwards. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
In the words of Miss Georgette Ebanks, rarely do I call back twice. Quincy Brown here. Now, so we have a problem then. Caymanians are being accused of having a bad attitude because they claim entitlement. This is my country. I deserve to work in my country. I'm a Caymanian. Oh, so we're going to get knocked down for that. Yet the Johnny come lately, those on work permit, those applying for PR and status, it's okay for them to have an entitlement attitude? Let me tell you something. It don't make no sense for the bona fide Caymanian, the grassroots Caymanian to apply for jobs, because recruiting agencies are right now, as I speak, recruiting in Manila, in Goa, and in London, and in Tokyo. So replacements are coming in as we have Caymanian school leavers graduating. What a mess we're in. What a mess we're in. So what do? You know, we talk about Caymanian, and the thing is, none of us really are, as to Steve Maxfield's point, to Dr. Maxfield's point, we're all British overseas territory citizens. Terms such as patriotism and nationalism, they do not hold water in these islands. I mean, we're transient. People just exist here. And we've really bent over backward with Caymankind to allow everybody to come here. And a lot of people who we grant status to are not really patriotic to this land, you know, because just take them to a football match, take them to a basketball match, and of course, naturally, they're going to hoot for the team of their origin, the country of their origin. You see?
Yep.
Yeah, it's not as it's as clear as mud. And there's no easy fixes. Mm-hmm. And we're also being accused of being xenophobic. We're being accused of foreign bashing. And we are the lone voices crying out in the wilderness. And you have high-ranking civil servants and politicians, they're going to tell you their hands are tied. So when I go into the schools, as I did yesterday and I will today, you have teachers, foreign teachers, who are doing their best to teach our children, saying to me, Quincy, bring us in more traditional Caymanian songs. because otherwise I'm going to have to teach the songs I know from my country, whether that's Ireland or Jamaica.
I'm going to ask you to leave us there, Quincy. We have to go to headline news now. Thank you very much. Folks, please stay tuned. For the record, we'll be back immediately after headline news. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. We have two callers on hold, but before we go to the callers, just want to sort of like continue the train of thought on the Caymanian Protection Law in 1971. Mr. Benson goes on to point out that he says, and Mr. President, he talks about the composition of the Caymanian Protection Board, chairman, a deputy chairman, 7 other members who would be appointed to hold office at the pleasure of the administrator, and it would take 5 members to make a quorum, and the sections of the law that he felt were really, really important to deal. What they would deal with would be first the determination of Caymanian status in cases of doubt, the granting of Caymanian status, the determination of immigration appeals, the grant of gainful occupation license, what we now know as work permits, to certain persons of non-Caymanian status, and also the determination of any ancillary matter connected with all of these things. Now, the determination of Caymanian status in cases of doubt meant there were situations where if you were a British, a Commonwealth citizen, and if you had been residing in the Cayman Islands for 5 years, with the coming into effect of the 1971 legislation, you could get a declaration from the courts.
You were automatically deemed to be Caymanian.
Deemed to be Caymanian.
And you could get a declaration from the court saying that you were resident here, and as a result of that, by operation of law, you possess Caymanian status. And I think we had a famous case in that regard in relation to that. I don't remember the name.
Case.
Yes, that was the McDonald's case.
And I had also one with Roper.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So we had that situation there. It says to ensure fair play and impartiality of this board, the law specifically makes it illegal for any member who has direct or indirect pecuniary interest in any matter to join in the discussion or to vote on any matter, within the board. There is also provisions for appeals on certain matters from the board to the administrator in executive council as well. So that was it. And then the bill also defined Caymanian status, and I think that this was a very poor example of this because we still find ourselves in a situation today. The bill defines Caymanian status and provides for the grant of such a status to persons of British citizenship or British subjects not possessing such status upon the fulfillment of certain conditions. Section 17, subsection 1 of the law states who may make applications and the conditions on which the board must be satisfied before granting Caymanian status. He says, Mr. President, again, I feel this is sufficient interest, sir, to elaborate on any British subject who has attained the age of 18 years may at any time make application to the board for the grant of Caymanian status if the board is satisfied that the applicant has been ordinarily resident in the islands for a period of 5 years upwards immediately prior to making an application and has been declared to be so resident under subsection A. Say this is where the court one can make an application to the court for a determination as to whether he has been ordinarily resident or domiciled here. The applicable word there in that case is domiciled. We have seen that put into legislation, and it has created nothing but a headache for people, and we'll get Dr. Steve McField to talk about the issue of domicile as soon as we take these two calls and when we come back. Let's go to the first caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. This is Arden McLean.
Good morning,
morning.
sir.
Morning to you, Ms. Mayor, and Dr. McField.
Good morning,
Good morning,
sir.
sir.
Or should I say Madam Speaker, because this nomenclature seems to be a big deal nowadays. And why I say that, madam, is because that I keep hearing people talk about the protection law. And like OC said, it's a mere nomenclature that was changed. The objective of the protection law was to enhance the lives of Caymanians, protect them with the balance that Benson spoke of. Mm-hmm. All we did was change to the immigration law. So we need to start forgetting about the nomenclature that has been changed, because the objective must be the same. Mm-hmm. The problem we're having is that our legislature, and that's all of us, does not sit down and make decisions collectively on what is required in the immigration law. Every government, including the one that I was a part of, put their own spin on it and take it down to the Legislative Assembly and force it by virtue of the majority.
You're right.
On to the people of this country. We need to come together and work this thing out to be able to understand that whomever comes here, what conditions under which they can remain here. Whilst doing that, we need to ensure that Caymanians come first.
Question for you, Mr. McLean. In the absence, and I realize that you're not the leader of the opposition, but it's going to take several weeks, if not months, for the government to get its footing and to decide where their priorities are going to lie in relation to legislation. People in the past have been critical of governments and the People's Progressive Movement as well, and have said that after the election, one of the things that they did was they rushed down to the Legislative Assembly to amend the immigration law to accommodate people who were here on work permits, people who were seeking permanent residency, and they did absolutely nothing for Caymanians in terms of addressing the issues that were facing Caymanians. Instead, they went down to the Legislative Assembly and addressed the issues that were facing non-Caymanians. Now, bearing in mind there's going to be some lag time in relation to the government getting its footing and its direction, can we expect to see any private member's motion coming forward in relation to the immigration law to address the pressing issues of Caymanians?
You will see much of that, my friend, and it won't be long from the beginning. I recall when the Premier made his rounds early in his tenure on this immigration law. I recall warning or advising the Premier that he needed not to do what he was doing. Those people had already been given 2 extra years on their work permit after the 9 years. Mm-hmm. After the 8 that was set at the time.
Yes.
And any employer who had not made provisions at that time, they would have had to suffer the consequences. I told him in extensive example, we know how long these things take. They take 4 or 5 years before these things are considered. And what we're doing is putting the ball right in their court, and so said, so done. Now we are here with this. But you talk about the first thing they did, the last administration. 2 things they did that is forever etched in my memory, will forever be etched in my memory. The first thing they did was that. First thing, they rushed to do that. And the last thing was the legal practitioner's law. And in both instances, it was taken away from Caymanians. First and last. Now let's see what their first and last is going to be during this administration.
I'm going to ask you to leave us. So, go ahead.
But just let me say.
Very quickly for us, because we are going to break.
Quincy just called in and talked about this nationalism and this protectionism. Everybody's doing it. England is doing it. What do you think caused Brexit?
The Brexit talks now will include whether or not how tough. We'll see how tough the UK immigration laws will be, and they have to make a determination as to those European citizens who are currently residing in the UK. What happens to them, and those that come later.
Briefly, see, just to finish off, United States is in a legal war with it now. President, Supreme Court, Congress, everybody. And Ireland has done it for years. But you remember that Irish president who cursed us off the other day when he was taken over as Chamber of Commerce and said we need to stop this protectionism and this nationalism. Well, I say to them all, they are the first when they're in their home of origin to practice it. And I wear it with pride. Now, we'll see. Last, but
very quickly for me.
By no means the least. I know Benson, I know Warren. Warren said, hasten slowly. Benson said, we need a balance. I am saying now, for the record, not your show, but for the record of the country.
For the record.
Okay? Caymanian status must be reserved for marriage and descent only.
Yes.
And thank you, Madam Speaker and Ms. Dr. McField, because the two of you have a point of reference.
Yep.
You all know best what this country needs. You are the typical story of what I have always said. They see our glory. They don't know our story. You, too, know our story. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, caller. Let's grab the other caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yeah, good morning, O.C. Good morning, Dr. Steve McField.
Good morning.
Speaker, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As I listen to you, I listened to you on Monday, and I think you have the best show on the radio right now.
Thank you.
Because with people like Madam Speaker and Dr. Steve, you got people with knowledge about Cayman and about the island. But what I want to talk about this morning is that when I hear people talk about they have a right to be Caymanian. Now, I think the definition of a Caymanian is somebody who's born and raised in the Cayman Islands, or has to have
no, not really,
two parents or something like that. He doesn't have to be born here, but if he's got two parents, he can be Caymanian.
Unfortunately, if you even look in our constitution refers to the definition that is in the immigration law. That's right. Our constitution relies on what's in the immigration law because the framers of our constitution didn't want to go further to make a definition of it. And of course, in doing that, you wanted to ensure that the definition in the constitution didn't clash with the definition in our immigration law. Otherwise, we would have to change one. Sorry about that, caller.
Yeah, okay. Well, the thing was that I think that, in my opinion, a Caymanian is somebody who is born of Cayman parents in this island or born someplace else but Cayman parents, basically. At least one parent, that's what I understand it to be. But the point is I'm trying to make now is that when I saw a letter that was written by the Prime Minister of Australia, I think it was, talking about these people who come to the island, they want this right and they want that right and want the other right. Now, if we have laws in this island that we say this is how we want, the majority of people want those laws to be in this island. People come into this island, and then all of a sudden we're going to have these people have a right to do this and a right to do that. I remember when I lived in the States in 1964. I went in 64. I think it was 1968 or around that time that Madeleine O'Hare decided that she didn't want her son to be in school and say prayers and all that. Like that was the tradition in the United States, like it was here. Well, they went to court. And some liberal judges, I guess, decided that she had a right to keep her child from hearing these things. Instead of the judges saying, well, sorry, madam, we're sorry that you don't appreciate these things, but the rest of the children do. So therefore, you're going to have to just take your son on one side while they're doing their thing, because that's good democracy. The majority of people wanted to do that. So your son's going to have to stay outside until after the prayers are open. But no, they decided he had a right to do it. And that is has destroyed communities throughout the world all of a sudden today because these people, everybody got rights, and rights takes away the right of some of these rights takes away the right of the majority of people, and that's what we have to be careful with, ladies and gentlemen, because we have always sort of bent to the rules. And when somebody came in and said, "Well, yeah, well, you know, this is what they're doing in the United States or in Europe or whatever," so we had to adopt. And I think it would take us down a path that is going to destroy all those wonderful rules and regulations we used to have over the years. And I pray each day that God would bless this island and help us not to be taken away by what people who come here tell us to do, but to have our own rules and regulations. Like I said, the Prime Minister of Australia, if you read her letter that she had wrote, it was the most beautiful thing I ever read. And I think we need to stand up and say, not going to bend the rules because you want to live here.
Thank you very much, caller, for that. We're going to go to a commercial break now. When we return, we will continue our discussion. We're going to close the phone calls out, Paul, at this point in time, because we really want to get into some of the technical discussion in relation to the Caymanian Protection Law and where we were then, where we are now as well. So we will be back shortly after this break. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm going straight to Madam Speaker. She wants to make some comments in relation to a statement made earlier about our Constitution and that our Constitution, our present Constitution, does not define Caymanian but relies on the definition that is in our immigration law. Madam Speaker.
Well, you know, the Constitution is the overriding document in the country. It's a document by which this island is administered. And it's the fact of the matter is, I spent 4 years in the Parliament immediately following the passage of that Constitution, in which legislation across the board in this country had to be brought in line with the Constitution. Now, if we had defined Caymanian status in the Constitution, the immigration law would have had to fall in line with it, not vice versa, where the Constitution falls in line with the immigration law. Whoever was doing that thinking had it turned around. Whatever was included in the Constitution had to be, all legislation had to be brought in line with it. And it's unfortunate that even now we are still in this position where we are putting off things. We have put off the PR business until it has become a huge giant that is going to swallow us up. We're talking about having 800 people on PRs. Let's think about it. That's 800 people. The Premier is saying he's going to make sure that there's no massive grant. Well, let me read you what the governor said. The present governor. Although immigration policy is delegated to the Cayman Islands government, and it's delegated to the Premier in this instance, I am well aware of the current problems surrounding the immigration point system and the delay in processing applications that these issues have caused. The United Kingdom has made it clear that it expects the overseas territories to abide by their international legal obligations. And that's what's staring us in the face while we deal with these 800 people who are on PRs.
Now, before we go to Dr. Steve in terms of talking about domicile, we see the UK is now in the Brexit negotiations. One of the central issues of that is what will happen to all of the European Union citizens who are presently residing in the UK. Because remember, there's the whole issue of open borders. They're allowed to reside and to work in any European Union country without the need for a work permit. When the UK is no longer part of the European Union in that regard, they're going to have to decide what happens to those persons who are residing there now and those who come later. I have seen things in the news that talk about those who have been there for 5 years will be afforded the opportunity to reside there, and not only to reside there, but to bring their families as well. And those who come after a cutoff date, then it will be a different story for them. This is an excellent opportunity for us to piggyback on the issues that the UK is facing now in relation to immigration. They recognize that they have to institute stringent laws and regulations now, because they're not a part of the European Union, or won't be a part of it. They should then be able to see the issues that we are facing here, the problems that we are facing, and that's a time for us to enact legislation at the same time, because they can't say, do as we say, not as we do. We're going to do as they do too, and if they want to institute stricter policies, then we should do the same thing. That's the time for us to take advantage.
But Mr. Connor, the British have another big problem. There's almost 2 million British subjects working in Europe. And
yes,
they have to, when they are negotiating, they have to decide whether they're going to find place for their own 2 million British subjects to come back home to work if the European Union decides to throw them out. You know, and the whole thing of immigration with Britain, I was in Hong Kong just days before that territory was ceded to China. And there was a big talk, you know, Britain had limited to 20,000 people from Hong Kong who would be allowed to come to Britain, because they didn't want to be overrun by the people from Hong Kong who might decide that they're going to claim their British citizenship and come to England to live. In truth and fact, the Hong Kong people didn't want to go to England to live, because they did not feel that they had had a fair deal from England in the years that they had administered their territory. And so they preferred to stay with China, because they said they were the bank for China. The money was in Hong Kong, and the need for the money was in China. So they were quite happy to stay where they were. But we're going to find in this thing with Brexit that England not only has to talk about what she's going to do to people who are in her country now, but about her own citizens that are overseas in the European Union. If they decide to throw them out, how is she going to accommodate them? They're going to have to find employment for them. Some of these people are in technical positions and all the rest of it. That's going to be one huge, big part of all the negotiations that has to go on. Okay. We have to start thinking in terms in Cayman of what is good for Cayman, as opposed to what everybody thinks we should have and everybody thinks we should do. Okay. It is time. This is not being insular. This is being sensible.
Practical and pragmatic.
Yes. Sensible.
That's what it is.
It is being sensible about who we are,
okay,
and about what we want in our country. We have 800, I want to say this before I finish, we have 800 people now that is we are going to have to decide what we're going to do with them. And while we're dragging the process out some more, because we have already dragged it for 3-4 years already, we dragged it and we've had them in limbo waiting for some decision to be made. While we're making the decisions about these 800 people and we're saying it's not going to be a mass thing, well, if we're going to drag that out some more, they're going to be here with us, occupying the positions they occupy, and in an even better position to say to us, this is what we want.
And more will qualify, and more will amass time. So it'll be more than 800. It could potentially double again.
Will increase.
Dr. Steve Macfield, on the Caymanian Protection Law 1971, part of the criteria for the determination of Caymanian status, one was residency, but they also included the fact that you had to be domiciled in the Cayman Islands. And I saw where Miss Annie Borden, in her debate, being a law agent, knowing the law and stuff like that, talked about her understanding of domicile might be. For the benefit of our listening audience, explain to us how sometimes that can be what we call Achilles' heel in terms of legislation.
That's right. It's an elusive word and not a defined concept. Because domicile is what anybody interpret it to be. And domicile is supposed to be, you're supposed to be resident in a country, permanent resident in a country. and it has caused so many problems now that a lot of legislation and a lot of people
It's been eliminated from it.
eliminated from their legislation. For instance, let me give you an example of domicile in Canada. You're domiciling for if you become permanent resident in Canada, you can use your residency if you're not domiciled there. Okay. Now here is what legislation and court cases have defined as being domicile. If you have an apartment where you rent and you have a closet and clothes still hanging in your closet, you are said to be domiciled. If you have bought a plot of a grave site to bury yourself, and you have bought a place to be buried, they say you're still domiciled. So it depends on the courts. It depends on who interprets it. But what it means to be domiciled, different from ordinary resident, is that you're there permanently.
Can the whole issue of domicile be a frame of mind as well as
it could be a frame
state
of mind?
Because that's what Miss Annie Hulda Borden referred to. She said, I've known domicile to be defined as it can be a state of mind as well. What your intentions were. I came to the Cayman Islands and I had no intention of leaving whatsoever, and here is what I did to demonstrate, to solidify that fact that I had no intentions of leaving.
Because people are going to say it has to be an objective test. Let's see how you demonstrate your intention to live here. Have you bought a grey plot?
Okay.
Have you rented an apartment and you left clothes in your closet to be able to come back to wear them? That is defining domicile in some places. So it's a very elusive word, and a lot of framers of legislation have left it out of their legislative process.
Okay, I'm going to put two of you on the spot now. We are where we are in terms of permanent residency in Caymanian status. What is the practical solution, the first move that needs to be made in terms of rectifying the situation? People are saying something needs to be done. We're in a crisis situation. We see Caymanians, for instance, who go and apply for jobs are being told your passport or your birth certificate is not sufficient for you to establish the fact that you are Caymanian. You need to go to the immigration department and get a letter stating that you possess Caymanian status. That's for Caymanians born here and have nothing to show, but yet you have the person who has been who has acquired Caymanian status by grant, who has a nice certificate with a beautiful border on it, signed by the chairman of the immigration board, saying that person possessed Caymanian status.
He's a Caymanian.
Yes, but he has something to show. But the person who only has a birth certificate and a passport, possibly, and the passport I can understand because the passport doesn't necessarily mean that you possess Caymanian status, but you have a birth certificate. They're saying no, you have to go and get something else, but the person who has a status grant certificate is fine.
Well, the passport states where you're born. You know, and the passport says whether you have British Overseas Territory citizenship or whatever. At least mine does. Mr. Arden McLean, when he called in a while ago, talking about what they're going to do. Whatever is done with the immigration law, we need to go back to the formats we had before, where when legislation of that magnitude came to the House, they sent it to a select committee of the whole House, not of the government. The government didn't rain it down on you. They sent it to a select committee of the whole House. And the whole House sat down and considered it and decided what they wanted in that legislation. That is the only way we're going to get the kind of immigration legislation that we actually need for this country.
But do we need to the question of permanent residence, which
well,
we have had.
that question-
We have had a British minister, Baroness Scotland, come and tell us that the problem that we have with our immigration law is the issue of permanent residence. Because what does permanent residence do for you? What it does is it means that you're no longer under any restriction on the time that you may remain in the territory. And if you have been here for 5 years, then you qualify to be naturalized as a British overseas territory citizen. With that naturalization, then you're able to get a British passport that says Cayman Islands on it, a British overseas territory passport. And it is then the stepping stone after 15 years for you to apply for Caymanian status. Do we need to remove permanent residence from our legislation? Take that, remove it from there, and if you want to replace it with something, replace it with permanent residence for those people who genuinely want to live and retire in the Cayman Islands and have the financial wherewithal to support their retirement here in the Cayman Islands.
I think so, and I think so, and all of those qualifications should be a part of the application to do so. Right now, we have made people to believe that they have the right to live here, and we have accumulated these, not 800, probably 3 or 4 dependents too, along with them. We are going to have to look to deal with that and bite the bullet and take care of that. We're going to have to do that because
as we speak more and more, the numbers are getting larger and
exactly.
larger.
This happened. We talk about the status grants, and we have vilified the Mr. Bush for that. But I have a copy of the governor's speech that he made on Radio Cayman, telling us in very plain language that the British looked at 5 years as being all that was necessary, and they might stretch it to 10. But he was not even sure that they would give us that much time for someone to be here, right? Before we decided that we were going to grant them Caymanian status. So we had all of these people that had been here some 20 years, some 15 years, hundreds of people over 10 years. And we're done with that, just what we're doing with this PR. We put it off and we put it off and we put it off until it blew up in our face. Then we had the option, you do something about it or we will do something about it, because never forget that the British has that authority.
Okay, well, what about...
If they want to grant 10,000 status grants in the Cayman Islands tomorrow morning, they can do it.
An order in council, they can do it tomorrow
so
morning.
So what we have to understand is, at that point in time, we had an option. Either we do it and fix what we could fix out of it, or they would do it for us.
We
are now in that same position with the PR. We put it off and we put it off, and we created this monster.
Yeah. Well, let's not do it the way that we did it in 2003, where all in sundry.
No, not all in sundry.
And we had the police headquarters being swamped for people looking for their police records, and the lobby of the government administration being swamped, and then a lot of corruption taking place as a result of that. People making money off of it by going around and saying, give me your name, I can get status for you, and being paid money and stuff like that. We don't need that. But
we don't need that.
Those who are qualified now, after the thorough investigation and background checks, those who are qualified now, we should consider doing it.
Consider their applications at least.
Consider their applications.
Now, what about Mr. McLean's point that we need to reserve Caymanian status either through marriage
I agree with
or
him.
through some Caymanian connection?
I agree with him.
Either a father, mother, and grandfather.
I agree
and
with
what
him.
we don't need to do is, I do not believe that a person should be able to acquire Caymanian status by virtue of the fact that they have a child who is Caymanian.
No.
In the United States, the anchor babies and stuff like that, parents do not qualify for United States citizenship because they have a child born. Now, some people may feel compassionate about the whole thing and say, well, do we really want to deny that child a father or a mother? You're not denying parental rights and responsibilities. What you're not making
What
sure
you're not doing
that
is
you
give
don't
them
create
citizenship.
citizenship and creating the anchor baby scenario.
But if you're in the United States legally and you have a child there, you are entitled to pursue citizenship. If you've come into
But not on the grounds of the fact that you have a child.
if you've come into the United States illegally and you have a child there, the child is an American citizen, but you are not.
Yeah.
But we're back to the thing about the PR status. When every year the PR status, the PR's permanent residence exists, is a year in which, and you look at the unemployment in Cayman, is a year in which there was a Caymanian who didn't get a job because somebody else was already sitting in the job. I'm working in a restaurant as a chef. We have a young Caymanian come back who is a chef, but they cannot get that job because there's already someone in that position. That is what if you look at the unemployment, we now have unemployment of qualified Caymanians. And this has happened in the last few years in this island because the glass ceiling has gotten thicker. The more people we give permanent residence to, the more people we give Caymanian status to, those are levels that they're up there. And they're blocking the possibility of young Caymanians who are coming back here qualified for those positions. We have Caymanians who have been walking the streets for 2 years here and can't get a job. Okay. It's ridiculous. And they tell you, if you go to a restaurant to look for a job, we're going to pay $4.50, and Caymanians won't work for that. Says who?
Paul has been extremely generous to us. We've been way over time. I can't go 2 days in a row, Dr. Steve McField, without giving you an opportunity for your closing comments.
I
don't need it.
Comments, I says, during the last national election debate, a candidate vying for to represent the people of this country stated that amendments should be made to the Constitution to make it mandatory that heads of the police, customs, and prison to be Caymanian. The Cayman Constitutional Order 2009 does not require an amendment to make it mandatory that heads of public departments such as police heads, customs heads, and prison must be Caymanian. Section 16, subsection 5 in Part 1, the Bill of Rights and Freedoms and Responsibilities of the Cayman Constitution Order 2009, of which that candidate obviously did not read, or if he did read it, did not understand it. Section 16, subsection 5 clearly sets out the direction for all appointments to public office in the public service, discipline force, or any local government office or government company to be Caymanian. For the purpose of any doubt, I set out the wording of Section 16, subsection 5. It says, nothing in any law shall be held to contravene subsection 1, that's the discrimination section, to the extent that it requires a person to be Caymanian or to possess any other qualifications, not being a qualification specifically relating to any such description of grounds as is mentioned in subsection 2, the list of discrimination definition section, in order to be eligible for appointment to any office in the public service or in a discipline force or any office in the service of a local government authority or a body corporate established directly by any law for public purposes. Section 55 of the Cayman Constitution Order 2009 states that a governor has responsibility for defense, external affairs, and internal security, including the police and the appointment, promotion, or transfer of any person to any public office, and suspension, termination of employment, dismissal, or retirement, including disciplinary action. But Section 55 does not give a governor power to say whether any of the people appointed to those public service posts should be Caymanians or non-Caymanian. That power is in the hands of Caymanians, the elected legislative members. It is them who can make a law to say all persons, not just heads of all those public institutions, must be Caymanian. If elected legislators read and know how to interpret the Constitution and how to draft such a law, a governor still has power to appoint, but a governor would have to appoint a Caymanian. But it is not surprising that so many of us and so many standing for public office seem not to know much about the Constitution. These days are not the days of those stalwart representatives who knew their constitutional documents, standing orders, immunities and privileges, and could quote passages from Erskine Mays. It seems that some of us today are still engaged in a personality battle. Instead of usurping the knowledge readily available around us to obtain the relevant knowledge to educate our electorate and form collusive policy to move the country along, we pay large sums to foreign consultants to brief us, to tell us what our own people can tell us free of cost. Individually and connectively, I do not see much change or any change at all. Functionally, one cannot move forward confidently if one does not know where he is going. To know is to be informed. To be informed is to have knowledge. To have knowledge is to know how to lead confidently. Personally, I don't see a very great urge to work. I don't see a very great urge to work the Constitution pragmatically. I could be mistaken, but what will be the result if I'm right? Because the impression that is being openly propagated by many is that many of us are not prepared adequately for a high constitutional office.
Well, thank you very much for that, Dr. Steve. I want to thank Madam Speaker again for being with us this morning, and we extend our invitation for her on Friday morning if she can make it again on For the Record as well. We want to continue this discussion in relation to this. I want to thank you, our listening audience, for allowing Radio Cayman and by extension For the Record into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. I also want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters keepers. There's always someone out there who's less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't do that, then I suggest you donate to a worthy charity, because we always want to consider those who need, not necessarily those who want. And as For the Record is designed to empower you and to arm you with all of the information that you need in order to help you to make rational decisions when it comes to your political and economic future, I would recommend and advise you to visit the Legislative Assembly of the Cayman Islands website. If you have an interest in knowing what your legislators have to say at the time, in particular, the 1971 Caymanian Protection Law, its introduction, then go on to the the Legislative Assembly's website. Then you go to the Hansard Archives. And when you reach the Hansard Archives, you will see it runs from 1970 session to the 1990 session. If you look at 1971 session, click on to that, and you will find the debates there. There are other pieces of legislation that were introduced at the same time, but you can read for yourself. You can see exactly what the intentions were at that time of our legislators in relation to that. I say to you, have a great day. Continue to support your radio station, Radio Cayman. Join Sterling Dwayne Banks at 12 noon for Talk Today. I believe Mr. Gilbert McLean has been guest hosting for him for the past 2 days. I'm not sure if he'll be on again today, but please join him and continue the conversation with him as well. Have a great day, and as usual, we ask the good Lord to bless these three wonderful, beautiful Cayman Islands. And Paul, thank you for all the time that you've given us.
Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record.